Hey guys, welcome back to another new tips and tricks video for Friday the 13th the game. In this video we'll be talking about the double tap. You may be asking, what is the double tap? What the double tap allows you to do is break down doors quicker, and there are a few other things you can do with it that I'll be showing you later on in this video. Just to give you a little bit of a backstory on the double tap and how it came to be, there was a collaborative effort amongst Freeky, Something Cool, and Tommy86. Freeky was the one who discovered the double tap while playing as a camp counselor. It was later developed upon by Something Cool, who did all the experimenting and testing to figure everything out and advance the technique forward into what you see it as of today. Tommy86 contributed tech support and gave his input when there were group discussions about the double tap. So shout out to Freeky, Something Cool, and Tommy86 for putting in the work to discover/create the double tap, and I'll be dropping their links to their channel down below in the description box, and I'll also have a pinned comment at the top of this video with their links so you guys can check them out. So without further ado, let's jump right into the video and take a look at the double tap.
Damn it! No! Help me! Please! Anyone!
As you guys can see demonstrated in this clip, the double tap allows you to break down doors faster. In the next clip we'll go over some important information you'll need to know, and then we'll go over the controls. Before we do anything, it's important that we first discuss what on host and off host means. So let's talk about the differences between being on host versus being off host. When you're on host, it just means you're the host for the game and you're acting as the server for everyone to connect to. You can only be host when you're playing a private match. Also, playing offline bots is technically on host as well because you don't have a ping. So when you send invites out to friends or opponents and they accept your private match invite, they will be connecting to you because you're the host. You'll notice everyone that joins your game will have numbers off to the side of their gamer tag. Those numbers are their ping, and it demonstrates how good their connection is by how low the numbers are, or how bad their connection is by how high the numbers are. You'll notice you don't have a ping, and the reason you don't is because you're hosting the game for everyone. When you don't have a ping, you'll have the benefit of your controls being more responsive because you're not having to deal with latency connection issues because you're hosting, which in turn makes things like the double tap easier to do. Now let's talk about off host. Very simply put, off host just means you're not the host. When you're playing in a public match, no one is ever going to be the host. The reason for this is because we now have dedicated servers and everyone connects to them. So everyone in a public match will have a ping that will indicate how good or bad their connection is. Because we have a ping, you're going to be dealing with some sort of latency with your connection, which will make things like the double tap a little harder to do. So obviously there are some differences between on host and off host, and because of this it will change the controls for the double tap slightly from when we use them on host versus when we use them off host, and I'll be showing you the differences with the controls in this video. But first up we're going to take a look at the on host controls, and then later on in the video I'll show you the off host controls. So let's get into it and take a look at the on host controls. So here's the on-host controls for the double tap. Let's start out with the PS4 controls first. You walk up to the door, press R3 to enter into combat stance, then press L3 and R2 together at the same time, but don't release R2, hold it down. Then watch your weapon swing towards the door, and as soon as your weapon makes contact with the door, press R3, and you'll enter into combat stance and you'll do an automatic heavy attack. After the automatic heavy attack, you can now release the R2 button you were holding down. Now let's go over the controls for Xbox. You walk up to the door, press right stick to enter combat stance, then press left stick and right trigger together at the same time, but don't release right trigger, hold it down. Then watch your weapon swing towards the door, and as soon as your weapon makes contact with the door, press right stick and you'll enter into combat stance and you'll do an automatic heavy attack. After the automatic heavy attack, you can now release the right trigger button you are holding down. Now that we've talked about the controls a little and have a rough idea of how the controls work, I now want to show you a visual example of the controls with a controller diagram in the next clip. So here's the controller diagram. What I'm going to do first is show you the controls at a slow pace so you can clearly see the controls for the double tap as I do them. Then later I'll show you the controls at the pace that I would normally do the double tap at, which will be a lot faster. So with that said, let's take a look at the controls with the controller diagram. Walk up to the door, press R3 to enter combat stance, press L3 and R2 together, hold R2, then press R3 on contact, now release R2. I've noticed that sometimes people overlook the importance of the part where you hold R2 down. So what you should do is really analyze the controls here and see how when I go to press L3 and R2 together at the same time that I don't release R2. I hold it down and I don't release it till the very end. So with that said, make sure you're doing that correctly because that's a very important part of the controls. Now I'm going to show you the controls at the normal pace I would do the double tap at to give you an idea of the real timing of the controls. The controls happen pretty quickly, so I'm not going to do any commentary over it, but you'll be able to see the controls light up as I do them. So let's take a look at the controls when they're done at their normal pace. So there you have it. That's more in line with the typical timing of the double tap. Now let's show you the controls for Xbox, and again I'm going to do the controls at a slower pace so you can clearly see the controls as I do them. So let's get into it. Walk up to the door, press right stick to enter combat stance, press left stick and right trigger together, hold right trigger, then press right stick on contact, now release right trigger. Make sure that when you go to press left stick and right trigger together at the same time that you hold right trigger down until the very end like you see demonstrated on the controller diagram. This is a very important part of the controls, so make sure you're doing that right. So now let's take a look at the normal pace of the double tap. And again, I'm not going to do any commentary over it because it happens too quick, but you'll be able to see the controls light up as I do them. So there you have it. That's more in line with the typical timing of the double tap. Now that we've gone over the controls and have a rough idea of how these controls work, we're now going to break down the double tap into smaller steps so it's easier to follow along and to understand. We're going to be doing the double tap on the wall throughout the next couple clips. The reason for this is because when you're first starting out, you'll most likely screw up on your timing a few times, and doing it on the wall will save you time by not having to deal with mistakenly going into a door breaking animation when you didn't mean to. So before we get started, I just want to reiterate that these are on-host controls. Okay, let's get started with step 1. You're going to walk up to the wall, then press R3 to enter combat stance, then press L3 and R2 together at the same time, but don't release R2, hold it down. If you've done the controls correctly, you'll do a light attack. A light attack is when your weapon swings from your side like you see in this clip. You don't want to be doing a heavy attack. That's when your weapon swings overhead, and that's not what we want. So what I suggest is to just do this a few times and familiarize yourself with step 1 of the double tap before you move on to step 2. Welcome to step 2 of the double tap. In step 2 we just have to add one more control onto what we learned in step 1 and then we'll have successfully done our first double tap. So we take what we learned in step 1, walk up to the wall, press R3 to enter combat stance, then press L3 and R2 together at the same time and hold R2. Now watch your weapon swing towards the wall, and as soon as it makes contact with the wall, press R3, and then you'll do an automatic heavy attack. So all we're adding onto the controls in step 2 is pressing R3 when our weapon makes contact with the wall so that we do an automatic heavy attack. I put a controller diagram off to the side so you can see the controls as I do them to further assist you in your understanding of the controls. So with that said, let's take a look at this clip demonstrating the double tap. You'll notice that when after you do a double tap, you remain in combat stance like you see here in this clip. So if we wanted to do the double tap multiple times in a row, we would repeat the controls, but we would leave out the first part of the controls where we press R3. The reason for this is because we're already in combat stance after doing a double tap, so if we were to press R3, we would be taking ourselves out of combat stance, which is something we don't want. On screen right now, you'll be able to see the controls if you were to do multiple double taps together. So let's go over the controls for this. You walk up to the wall, press R3 to enter combat stance, then press L3 and R2 together and hold R2. Press R3 on contact with the wall to do an automatic heavy attack, then release R2. Now you'll notice I put a red X over the R3 control, and the reason for this is because, like I said earlier, when you do a successful double tap, you remain in combat stance after. So if you were to press R3 when you go to repeat the controls, you would be taking yourself out of combat stance, which isn't what we want to do. So you're going to skip pressing R3 when you go to repeat the controls and go right into pressing L3 and R2 together, then hold R2. So hopefully that all made sense to you and we're both on the same page about how the controls work. In the next clip, I'm just going to give you some of my opinions on how to get more comfortable / consistent with doing the double tap. So with that said, let's get into it. Now that we understand the controls, we're going to practice doing a few double taps in a row on the wall. When you're first starting out, I recommend not worrying about going super fast with the double tap. Just focus on being consistent with it and take your time and focus on doing the controls at a comfortable pace like you see in this clip. Now after we've gotten comfortable with doing the double tap in a row a few times, it's now time to speed it up. So all we're going to do is what we did in the previous clip, but speed up our timing. You're most likely going to screw up a few times when you're trying to go faster for the first time. Just stick with it and keep practicing and you'll get better at it. You'll have to play around with your timing a little and see how fast you can go with it. Just a heads up, you can do the controls too fast and it will throw off your timing and then you'll mess up. So just play around with it a little and then you'll start to understand the timing. Also, I recommend doing the double tap for long durations when you're practicing it and see how many in a row you can do. This will help you develop your muscle memory for the double tap and you won't have to think about the controls as much when you do them. Now after we've done all our practicing on the wall and feel comfortable with doing the double tap, it's now time to take it to a door. Doing it on a door is no different than doing it on the wall. You do the same exact controls on the door. There are small challenges with doing it on a door though. One of those challenges is sometimes your weapon can get stuck in the door frame, and another is messing up on your timing and mistakenly going into a door breaking animation. Both of these things can slow down our goal of breaking down the door fast. So let's take another look at a double tap on the door, and later I'll explain some different variations of how you can go about approaching it. You'll see that I like to be dead centered with the door when I do the double tap, but there are other approaches you can take with it though. Some people like to be on a bit of an angle towards the door when they do the double tap. I've also seen people do the double tap then take a small step back then set up again. It's all personal preference, so just play around with it and figure out how you like doing it. Lots of people like doing the double tap with the spear. You'll notice it feels very quick when you use it with the double tap. Another advantage of the spear is its length and how you can hit people from a distance behind the door. There is another huge advantage to using the spear with the double tap that I'll be talking about later on in this video, so stay tuned for that. Here's just another clip experimenting with another weapon, and this time we're trying out the pickaxe. I'm not going to go through all the different weapons and bore you guys, but you should experiment with all the different weapons to find out which weapons you like using with the double tap. So in this clip I'm just taking out the doors. You can break down doors in a short amount of time on cabins that haven't been searched yet and the doors are unlocked, and this can be helpful later on in the match when counselors are looking for cabins to stay safe in for a couple seconds. But unfortunately for them, you've taken care of all the doors, and if you're using a Jason with destruction while using the double tap, you can break down doors even faster, obviously. Now it's time that we talk about the off-host controls for the double tap and how they differ from the on-host controls. So first up, let's start with the PS4 controls. You walk up to the door, press R3 to enter combat stance. Now just a little bit of information here. You'll see L3 and R2 with a double-sided arrow in between them with the words ping under it. This is to represent how you have to space out L3 and R2 controls depending on how high or low your ping is. The higher your ping is, the more you have to space out these two controls, and the lower your ping is, the less you have to space out these two controls. My ping fluctuates between 48 and 52 usually when I'm playing in a public match. The spacing I put between L3 and R2 is about 1 second. But everyone's ping is going to be different, so this is where you're going to have to do some experimenting to figure out the correct spacing of the controls for you with your ping. So now that we've got that information out of the way, let's start from the beginning again. You walk up to the door, press R3 to enter combat stance, then press L3. Pause for a duration depending on your ping, then press R2 and hold it, then press R3 on contact, now release R2. So now let's do the off-host controls for Xbox. You walk up to the door, press right stick to enter combat stance, then press left stick. Pause for a duration depending on ping, then press right trigger and hold it, then press right stick on contact, now release right trigger. So in the next clip, we're just going to do the off-host controls on a controller diagram to further assist you in your understanding of the controls when you're playing off-host. So let's take a look. So let's get started. We're going to do the controls at a slower pace here so you can clearly see the controls as I do them. I just want to make note that I'm spacing out these controls in these clips quite a bit just to hit home that you have to space out L3 and R2, but it varies depending on your ping how much you have to space out these controls, so you'll have to experiment with this to find out the right timing for you. So with that said, let's take a look at these off-host controls. Walk up to the door, press R3 to enter combat stance, then press L3 and pause for ping, then press R2 and hold it, and then press R3 on contact with the door, then release R2. So there you have it. I'm sure you can see the differences in the controls and how they vary slightly from on-host versus off-host. So with this demonstration, I'm not going to do the controls again and show you them at their normal pace. So just be aware that you have to do these controls a little bit faster than how I'm demonstrating them here in this clip. Now let's go over the off-host controls for Xbox. Just be aware I'm doing them at a slower pace so you can clearly see the controls as I do them. But when you actually go to do the controls yourself, you'll have to do them a bit faster. Walk up to the door, press right stick to enter combat stance, then press left stick, then pause for ping, then press right trigger and hold it, then press right stick on contact with the door, now release right trigger. So with all that said, hopefully that all made sense to you and you have a good idea of how the controls differ from on-host versus off-host now. So this is a clip of me playing in a public match. I'm using the double tap off-host controls here. It may take you a little while to get familiar with the rhythm of the off-host controls, but after some practice it will become easier. So here I brought up the scoreboard to show you my ping. It's fluctuating between 48 and 52. When my ping is around these numbers, I find that I only have to space out L3 and R2 controls by about 1 second when I'm playing off-host. But see this Vanessa's ping? It's pretty high. If they were playing as Jason and they were trying to do the double tap, they would have to space out L3 and R2 controls more because of how high their ping is. So if you're trying to do the double tap off host and it doesn't seem to be working for you, pull up the scoreboard and take a look at your ping, and depending on how high or low it is, make adjustments to how much you space out L3 and R2 controls. I was always under the impression that on-host was easier to do than off-host, but I've since had conversations with others that prefer off-host rather than on-host. With off-host, there's more timing involved and you have to be a bit more patient because you're having to space out the controls, which in my opinion makes them a little harder to do. But like I've said, some people prefer off-host rather than on-host, so you possibly might find this is the case for you as well. If you happen to struggle a little bit with the off-host controls, what you can do to practice it is ask a friend to make a private match where they're the host and then you can join the game as Jason, and then you can practice the double tap off-host so you can get more used to it. Now for our information segment. The double tap can only be done on a solid environmental, like a pole, a tree, a wall, a counselor that's blocking with a weapon, etc. It will not work otherwise. You can't do the controls in the air like you see here and expect to do the double tap. It always has to be done on a solid environmental. When I first started learning the double tap, I was always under the impression that I was doing the double tap off of the door because that's how it appeared to me when I was doing it. But something cool in Tommy86 informed me that that's not how it actually works. The door is not a solid enough environmental to get the rebound off of to do the double tap. You can see here in this clip that I'm trying to do the double tap on this open door and it's just not working, and the reason it's not is because, like I said earlier, the door is not a solid enough environmental to do the double tap off of. So you must be asking yourself, if the door isn't a solid enough environmental to get the rebound off of to do the double tap, then how are we doing the double tap? Well, I'm about to show you where we're actually getting our rebound off of to do the double tap. I've knocked down the door in this clip, but just pretend there is a door still there. What is happening when you use the double tap is your weapon is swinging and going through the door and damaging it. Then your weapon keeps going through the door, and then your weapon rebounds off the door frame, and that's where you're actually getting your solid environmental rebound off of to do the double tap. So like I demonstrated in this clip, each time you do the double tap, you're getting your rebound off the door frame because it's a solid environmental, unlike the door itself. In this clip, we're going to be using the axe to demonstrate something. You'll notice the axe is a smaller / shorter weapon, and because of this, its range doesn't reach as far. You'll see demonstrated in this clip, I'm dead centered with the door, and I'm doing the double tap controls, but it's not working. And the reason it's not working is because the axe doesn't have the range to reach the door frame from where we're standing, so that we can get our rebound off the door frame. Do you remember me mentioning earlier on in the video that the spear had an advantage? Well, that advantage is its range. It's such a long weapon that it's almost guaranteed to hit the door frame from wherever you stand when doing the double tap because of its length and range. I figured you guys might actually like to know what is happening with the controls when you use them, and who better to explain it than Something Cool who developed the double tap. You guys can pause the video and read through Something Cool's explanation of what is happening with the controls corresponding to whichever platform you play on. Now we're going to talk about using the double tap when playing as a camp counselor. When you use the double tap as a camp counselor, you're going to be using the off-host controls. So what I'd suggest doing is practicing the double tap on trees or walls and try to get your timing down correctly. So what you would do is walk up to the tree, press R3 to enter combat stance, then press L3, pause, then press R2 and hold it, then R3 on contact, now release R2. I'd suggest practicing this quite a bit. It's actually a lot of fun to do, and it gives you something to do when Jason isn't chasing after you. I'm constantly doing it on random trees just for fun and to help me dial in my timing. When you're first starting out to use the double tap on Jason, it can be pretty nerve-wracking because you're trying to pay attention to what he's doing, but at the same time you're trying to focus on doing the controls correctly. So what I suggest doing when you're first starting out is to use the double tap on Jason when he's busy breaking a door down or anything where he's in an animation, so that you have a few seconds to get in close and you can focus in on doing the controls correctly under a little less pressure because he's in an animation. Another good time to use the double tap on Jason is when he's grabbed a counselor. The animation of him grabbing and lifting up a counselor takes a few seconds, and this is perfect for us to set up properly and do the controls for the double tap under less pressure. Another good time to use the double tap is when he's getting up from being stunned, and you can get behind him and set up properly and then do the controls. Now if you want to use the double tap going toe to toe with Jason, there's a few ways you can go about it. First up, you can stand right in front of Jason, and then when he gets in close, do the double tap controls. I really don't recommend doing it this way. It's too risky and it's only going to work on inexperienced Jasons. Another way to go about it is to do some feints to try and gauge how willing he is to go for the grab. If he's not taking the bait, this is the perfect time to quickly turn around and get behind him, then quickly do the controls for the double tap. This is going to take some practice until you get the hang of it, because you're under a lot more pressure when you do it this way, and you're more likely to screw up on the controls because you only have a short window of opportunity to where you can pull off the double tap controls. When you go to turn behind Jason like you see in these clips, I recommend turning your camera angle as you position yourself behind him. If you don't do this, it makes it harder to track where he is. Another way you can go about it is if a Jason is using the R2 method of breaking a door down, you can count out the hits to the door, and on the very last hit to the door, run straight out and position yourself behind him while he's stuck in the animation and quickly do the double tap controls. Here's yet another way you can go about using the double tap, and this time we're going to use the double tap with a turn and burn. If you've never heard of a turn and burn, it was a technique that was figured out by Pappas, and I'll be linking a video in the description box demonstrating how to do it if anyone wants to learn how. The next few clips you see here is just me having some fun with the double tap by incorporating shift batting with it, but unfortunately I either got the stun when I didn't want it or I flat out missed, but you can see I timed it right and it was a lot of fun trying to pull this off. Here's another shift batting clip with the double tap, but we both missed on our attempts. Here's yet another shift batting clip with the double tap, but unfortunately I got the stun on the first hit. Luck just wasn't on my side when I was trying to get this, but you guys can see how you could incorporate shift batting with the double tap. Well, that brings another video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I just want to give a quick thank you to Something Cool, Tommy86, and someone who chooses to remain anonymous for all the suggestions and overall help with this video. And if you're new to my channel and you like my content, subscribe to stay up to date with future tips and tricks videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.